Hello again, it's BASMR, and I'm going to be reading some scary stories. These are fictional this time, and I don't know who the original author is, as these were just reposted, and it doesn't say who wrote them. And I didn't read them yet, so I hope they're good. Now this one is called The Body in the Bed. A man and a woman went to Las Vegas for their honeymoon and checked into a suite at a hotel. When they got to their room, they both detected a bad odor. The husband called down to the front desk and asked to speak to a manager. He explained that the room smelled very bad and they would like another suite. The manager apologized and told the man that they were all booked because of a convention. He offered to send them to a restaurant of their choice for lunch, compliments of the hotel, and said he was going to send a maid up to their room to clean and try and get rid of the odor. After a nice lunch, the couple went back to their room. When they walked in, they both could still smell the horrible odor. Again, the husband called the front desk and told the manager that the room still smelled really bad. The manager told the man they would try and find a suite at another hotel. He called every hotel on the strip, but every hotel was sold out because of the convention. The manager told the couple that they couldn't find them a room anywhere, but they would try and clean the room again. The couple wanted to go see the sights and do a little gambling anyway, so they said they would give them 2 hours to clean and then they would be back. When the couple had left, the manager and all the housekeeping staff went to the room to try and find what was making it smell so bad. They searched the entire suite and found nothing. So the maids changed the sheets, changed the towels, took down the curtains, put new curtains up, cleaned the carpet, and cleaned the suite again using the strongest cleaning products they had. The couple came back 2 hours later to find the room still had a bad odor. The husband was so angry at this point, he decided to find whatever the smell was himself. So he started to tear the entire suite apart. As he pulled the top mattress off the box spring of the bed, he found a dead body of a woman, which it figured was the cause. And on to the next story. This one is called The Babysitter and the Man. A married couple were going out for the evening and called in a teenage babysitter to take care of their 3 children. When she arrived, they told her they probably wouldn't be back until late, and that the kids were already asleep so she didn't disturb them. The babysitter started doing homework while awaiting a call from her boyfriend. After a while, the phone rings. She answers it, but hears no one on the other end. Just silence. Then whoever it is hangs up. After a few more minutes, the phone rings again. She answers, and this time there's a man on the line who says, in a chilling voice, "Have you checked the children?" Click. At first, she thinks it might have been the father calling to check up, and he got interrupted, so she decided to ignore it. She goes back to her homework, and then the phone rings again. "Have you checked the children?" says the creepy voice on the other end. Mr. Murphy? She asks, but the caller hangs up again. She decides to phone the restaurant where the parents said they'd be dining. But when she asks for Mr. Murphy, she is told that he and his wife had left the restaurant 45 minutes earlier. So she calls the police and reports that a stranger has been calling her and hanging up. Has he threatened you? The dispatcher asked. No, she says. Well, there's nothing we can really do about it. You could try reporting the prank caller to the phone company. A few minutes go by and she gets another call. Why haven't you checked the children? The voice says. Who is this? She asks, but he hangs up again. She dials 911 again and says, I'm scared. I know he's out there. He's watching me. Have you seen him? The dispatcher asks. She says, no. Well, there isn't much we can do about it, the dispatcher says. The babysitter goes into panic mode and pleads with him to help her. Now, it'll be okay, he says. Give me your number and address, and if you can keep this guy on the line for at least a minute, we'll trace the call. What was your name again? Linda. Okay, Linda, if he calls back, we'll do our best to trace the call, but keep calm. Can you do that for me? Yes, she says, and hangs up. She decides to turn the lights down so she can see if anyone's outside, and that's when she gets another call. It's me, the familiar voice says. Why did you turn down the lights? Can you see me? She asks, panicking. Yes, he says after a long pause. Look, you've scared me, she says. I'm shaking. Are you happy? Is that what you wanted? No. Then what do you want? She asks. After a long pause. Your blood. All over me. She slaps the phone down, terrified. Almost immediately it rings again. Leave me alone. Sorry if that was loud. She screams, but it's the dispatcher calling back. His voice is urgent. Linda, we traced that call. It's coming from another room in the house. Get out of there, now. She tears to the front door, attempting to unlock it and dash outside, only to find the chain at the top still latched. In the time it takes her to unhook it, she sees a door open at the top of the stairs. Light streams from the children's bedroom, revealing the profile of a man standing just inside. She finally gets the door open and bursts outside, only to find a cop standing on the doorstep with his gun drawn. At this point, she's safe, of course. But when they capture the intruder and drag him downstairs in handcuffs, she sees he is covered in blood. Come to find out, all 3 children had been murdered. Sorry, taking a moment to find the next story. Okay. Axe Murder Hollow. Susan and Ned were driving through a wooded, empty section of the whole highway. Lightning flashed, thunder roared, the sky went dark in the downpour. "We better stop," said Susan. Ned nodded his head in agreement. He stepped on the brake, and suddenly the car started to slide on the slick pavement. They plunged off the road and slid to a halt at the bottom of an incline. Pale and shaking, Ned quickly turned to check if Susan was all right. When she nodded, Ned relaxed and looked through the rain-soaked windows. "I'm going to see how bad it is," he told Susan, and went out into the storm. She saw his blurry figure in the headlights walking around the front of the car. A moment later, he jumped in beside her, soaking wet. "The car's not badly damaged, but we're wheel-deep in mud," he said. "I'm going to have to go for help." Susan swallowed nervously. There would be no quick rescue here. He told her to turn off the headlights and lock the doors until he returned. Axe Murder Hollow. Although Ned hadn't said the name out loud, they both knew what he had been thinking when he told her to lock the car. This was the place where a man had once taken an axe and hacked his wife to death in a jealous rage over an alleged affair. Supposedly, the axe-wielding spirit of the husband continues to haunt this section of the road. Outside the car, Susan heard a shriek and a loud thud and a strange gurgling noise, but she couldn't see anything in the darkness. Frightened, she shrank down into her seat. She sat in silence for a while, and then noticed another sound. Bump, bump, bump. It was a soft sound, like something being blown by the wind. Suddenly the car was illuminated by a bright light. An official sounding voice told her to get out of the car. Ned must have found a police officer. Susan unlocked the door and stepped out of the car. As her eyes adjusted to the bright light, she saw it. Hanging by his feet from the tree next to the car was the dead body of Ned. His bloody throat had been cut so deeply that he was nearly decapitated. The wind swung his corpse back and forth so that it bumped against the tree. Bump, bump, bump. Susan screamed and ran towards the voice in the light. As she drew close, she realized the light was not coming from a flashlight. Standing there was a glowing figure of a man with a smile on his face and a large, solid, and definitely real axe in his hands. She backed away from the glowing figure until she bumped into the car. Playing around when my back was turned, the ghost whispered, stroking the sharp blade of the axe with his fingers. "You've been very naughty." The last thing she saw was the glint of the axe blade in the eerie, incandescent light. Alrighty, the next story has a weird title. It's called Raw Heads and Bloody Bones. Way back in the deep woods there lived a scrawny old lady who had a reputation of being the best conjuring woman in the Ozarks. With her bedraggled black and gray hair, funny eyes, one yellow and one green, and her crooked nose, Old Betty was not a pretty picture. But she was the best there was at fixing what ailed a man, and that was all that counted. Old Betty's house was full of herbs and roots and bottles filled with conjuring medicine. The walls were lined with strange books brimming with magical spells. Old Betty was the only one living in the hollow who knew how to read. Her granny, who was also a conjurer, had taught her the skill as part of her magical training. Just about the only friend old Betty had was a tough, mean, ugly old razorback hog that ran wild around her place. It rooted so much in her kitchen garbage that all the leftover spells started affecting it. Some folks swore up and down that old razorback hog sometimes walked upright like mad. One fellow claimed he seen the pig sitting in the rocker on old Betty's porch, chattering away to her while she stewed up some potions in the kitchen. But everybody discounted that story on the account of the fellow who told it was a little too fond of moonshine. Rawhead was the name old Betty gave the razorback, referring maybe to the way the ugly creature looked a bit like some of the dead pigs come butchering time down in Hogsgad Hollow. The razorback didn't mind the funny name. Rawhead kept following old Betty around her little cabin and rooting up the kitchen leftovers. He'd even walk into town with her when she came to the local mercantile to sell her home remedies. Well, folks in town got so used to seeing Rawhead and old Betty around the town that it looked mighty strange one day around hog driving time when old Betty came to mercantile without him. "Where's Rawhead?" the owner asked as he accepted her basket full of home remedy potions. The liquids in the bottle swished in an agitated manner as Betty said, "I ain't seen him around today, and I'm mighty worried. You seen him here in town?" "Nobody's seen him around today. They would have told me if they did," the mercantile owner said. "We'll keep an eye out for you." "That's mighty kind of you. If you see him, tell him to come home straight away," old Betty said. The owner nodded in agreement and handed over her weekly pay. Old Betty fussed to herself all the way home. It wasn't like Rawhead to disappear, especially not the day they went to town. The man at the mercantile always saved the best scraps for the mean old razorback, and Rawhead never missed a visit. When the old conjuring woman got home, she mixed up a potion and poured it into a flat plate. "Where's that old hog got to?" she asked the liquid. It clouded over and then a series of pictures formed. First, old Betty saw the good-for-nothing hunter that lived on the next ridge sneaking around the forest, rounding up razorback hogs that didn't belong to him. One of the hogs was Rawhead. Then she saw him taking the hogs down to Hogskull Hollow, where folks from the next town were slaughtering their razorbacks. Then she saw her hog, Rawhead, slaughtered with the rest of the pigs and hung up for gutting. The final picture in the liquid was a pile of bloody bones that had once been her hog, and his scraped clean head lying with the other hogs' heads in the pile. Old Betty was infuriated by the death of her only friend. It was murder to her, plain and simple. Everyone in 3 countries knew knew that Rawhead was her friend, and that lazy hog stealing good-for-nothing hunter on the ridge was gonna pay for slaughtering him. Old Betty continued, or tried, to practice white conjuring most of the time, but she knew the dark secrets too. She pulled out an old secret book her granny had given her and turned the very last page. She lit several candles and put them around a plate containing the liquid picture of Rawhead and his bloody bones. Then she began to chant, "Rawhead and bloody bones, Rawhead and bloody bones." The lights from the windows disappeared, as if the sun had been snuffed out like a candle. Dark clouds billowed into the clearing where old Betty's cabin stood, and the hollow howl of dark spirits could be heard in the wind that plummeted the treetops. Rawhead and bloody bones. Rawhead and bloody bones. Betty continued the chant until a bolt of silver lightning left the plate and streaked out into the window, heading in the direction of Hog Skull Hollow. When the silver light struck Rawhead's severed head, which was piled on the hunter's wagon with the other hog heads, it tumbled to the ground and rolled until it was touching the bloody bones that was once inhabited its body. As the hunter's wagon rumbled away towards the ridge where he lived, the enchanted Rawhead called out, "Bloody bones, get up and dance." Immediately the bloody bones resembled themselves into the skeleton of the razorback hog walking upright, as Rawhead had often done when he was alone with old Betty. The head hopped on top of the skeleton, and Rawhead went searching through the woods for weapons to use against the hunter. He borrowed his sharp teeth. He borrowed the sharp teeth of a dying panther, the claws of a long dead bear, and the tail from a rotting raccoon, and put them over his skinned head and bloody bones. Then Rawhead headed up the track towards the ridge, looking for the hunter who had slaughtered him. Rawhead slipped past the thief on the road and slid into the barn where the hunter kept his horse and wagon. Rawhead climbed up into the loft and waited for the hunter to come home. It was dusk when the hunter drove into the barn and hitched his horse. The horse snorted in fear, sensing the presence of Rawhead in the loft. Wondering what was disturbing his usually calm horse, the hunter looked around and saw a large pair of eyes staring down at him from the darkness in the loft. The hunter frowned, thinking it was one of the local kids fooling around in his barn. "What have you got those big eyes for?" he snapped, thinking the kids were trying to scare him with some crazy mask. "To see your grave," Rawhead rumbled very softly. The hunter snorted irritably and put his horse into the stall. "Very funny. Ha, ha," the hunter said. When he came out of the stall, he saw Rawhead had crept forward a bit further. Now his luminescent yellow eyes and bare claws could be clearly seen. "What have you got those big claws for?" he snapped. "You look ridiculous." "To dig your grave," Rawhead intoned softly, his voice a deep rumble that raised the hairs on the back of the hunter's neck. He stirred uneasily, not sure how the crazy kid in his loft could have made such a scary sound, if it really was a crazy kid. Feeling a little spooked, he hurried to the door and let himself out of the barn. Rawhead slipped out of the loft and climbed down the side of the barn behind him. With nary a rustle to reveal his presence, Rawhead raced through the trees and up the path to a large moonlight rock. He hid in the shadow of the huge stone so that the only things showing were his gleaming yellow eyes, his bare claws, and his raccoon tail. When the hunter came level with the rock on the side of the path, he gave a startled yelp. Staring at Rawhead, he gasped, "You nearly knocked the heart right out of me, you crazy kid. What have you got that crazy tail for?" "To sweep your grave," Rawhead boomed, his enchanted voice echoing through the woods, getting louder and louder with each echo. The hunter took to his heels and ran for his cabin. He raced through the old well house, past the wood pile, over the rotting fence and into his yard. But Rawhead was faster. When the hunter reached his porch, Rawhead leapt from the shadows and loomed above him. The hunter stared in terror up at Rawhead's gleaming yellow eyes in the ugly razorback hog's head. His bloody bone skeleton with its long bare claws, sweeping raccoon's tail, and his gleaming sharp panther teeth. "What have you got those big teeth for?" he gasped desperately, stumbling backwards from the terrible figure before him. "To eat you up, like you wanted to eat me," Rawhead roared, descending upon the good-for-nothing hunter. The murdering thief gave one long scream in the moonlight. Then there was silence and the sound of crunching. Nothing more was ever seen or heard of the lazy hunter who lived on the ridge. His horse also disappeared that night. But sometimes folks could see Rawhead roaming through the forest in the company of his friend, Old Betty. And once a month, on the night of the full moon, Rawhead would ride the hunter's horse through town, wearing the old man's blue overalls over his bloody bones, with a hole cut out for his raccoon tail. In his bloody, bare-clawed hands he carried his raw, razorback hog's head, lifting it high against the full moon for everyone to see. And I think that's enough stories for now. Not gonna lie, I would be devastated like that, like Old Betty, especially because I love pigs, and that would make me so sad. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed those stories,